Topic of this book should be Achilas Arai. That's what everybody did, I guess. They just eat.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Maisris, Perek Beis, Halachet Dalet. We're learning today Daf Chai, Daf Yud Ches, and we are starting 5 lines from the top of the Amid by the new Mishnah. So recapping, what we have been learning is the following, that even after the Gemar Melachim, the produce is not fully tevel vadai to the level that you cannot even snack. If one is planning to take it home, when one is planning to take whatever you are growing home, even after Gemar Melacha, let's use these words, the produce becomes fully established. It becomes, there's a kivius only when there is re'iyas penei bias, and as we learned in the Rambam, that really there are shisha devarim that are going to affect the kvius, bias mekach, Eish and Melach, and Truma and Shabbos. And we are in the sugya of a Mekach. We just had the Ashita of Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah, that even when there is a sale, if the seller did not give the buyer 2 items at a time or more, he only gave him 1 item at a time. The example is a person is buying figs, and for whatever reason, the seller only gave him 1 item at a time. Since there is no tziruf, since there is absolutely no gathering, even though there was a mekach, this type of mekach is not going to be koiveya lemaisris. And actually, the Gemara said on Daf Yud Zayin that even Rabbi Meir will agree to Rabbi Yehuda that if the buyer himself is the one that's picking the fruit or the vegetable from the ground, he's the one that's taking it. If he only takes 1 at a time, the Rashirilio says, then it doesn't even look like a sale. It can look like it was a gift, even though money was given, even though people know that money was given, but it looks like, a gift for a gift. Sale is only when there is something substantial, whatever other svara we might throw to that. So actually, both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda conceptually agree that at times mekach is only effective when there's tziruf. The machlekes is what happens if the seller is giving it to the buyer. L'Rabbi Meir, tziruf is not needed, and Rabbi Yehuda, tziruf is needed. This is where we're up to. The Mishnah now will go into greater details of this tziruf. How do you define 2 items together? We're going to see from our Mishnah that if the sale was chal, if the sale was affected when the produce was attached to the ground, if already at that time the produce belonged to the buyer, then such a mekach will never establish a tithing obligation, even if the buyer will pick 2 or more at a time. That will be the first topic of the Mishnah. The bulk of today's shir, both in the Mishnah, which is going to be in the entire Amid, and the Gemara that we're going to be learning today and tomorrow, will share the following rule. Couple of steps. Step number 1 is produce that's acquired by a worker for compensation for his labor. Means if I work for you, and instead of the agreement is, you're not paying me cash, you're paying me produce, that is also called mekach. Of course, mekach, a sale, doesn't have to mean that I'm giving you money. Mekach can also be affected by I'm giving you my service, I'm giving you my labor. However, there are psukim and parshas kiseitze that allow a worker at a certain window when he's working with produce that grows from the ground, when that produce is already disconnected from the ground, we're going to have to see exactly when, the worker has the right during his time of work to eat from that produce. He's not allowed to hoard it. He's not allowed to put it in his pocket, to put it in a keli and take it home. But while he's working, he's allowed to eat. This is very similar to the lav, to a negative commandment that we also have in Parshas Kiseitze, where the Torah writes, Lo yisachsoim shoir b'dishay, that when an ox, just as an example, is threshing grain, one is not allowed to muzzle the ox. In other words, while the animal is working, the animal should have access to eating the food. The same is with the worker at a certain point. Now, here is going to be the Mishnah. So let's go. I'm working for you. The Torah gave me rights to eat the produce. Whatever rights I have, min ha-Torah, that we're not going to call that a sale. There's no sale there. What's going to happen if a worker, from his ignorance or for other reasons, verbally stipulates with the balabas, listen, When I'm working for you, I'm going to have the right to be eating from that product. So even though the worker was the one that stipulated that as part of his agreement, the way the Marafulda, and therefore the way we will learn this sugya will be that still, since the worker would have had that exact right anyways, his stipulation didn't add anything. Therefore, when he takes that product and he eats it, it's not called mekach, and indeed he's allowed to eat it achilas aray. The moment the worker stipulates to have a right that goes beyond what the Torah gave him, when he goes into the beyond, there it will be considered mekach, and even though he can take it, that was the agreement, but he will not be allowed even to have achilas aray because we will trigger the rule of mekach. Now, of course, it goes without saying, but medvaram amurim, that he's only taking 2 or more. I mean, we're not contradicting the first sugya. If he only takes one at a time, then even if he would have paid for it. So one thing has nothing to do with the other. Just want to throw that out there. We're going to have in the Mishnah a explicit machlokes tanoim, whether mekach establishes a kvius if the produce is loy nigmar malachtan. I know we touched upon this. We mentioned this. But in the previous Mishnah, the explicit machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, was regarding Truma. In our Mishnah, we're going to have this same machlokes regarding Mekach, and the Gemara and the subsequent Sugya is going to focus primarily today on this din of the rights of a worker while he's working, when could he, when can he not, and again, and the comparison that we make between this law and the law of not muzzling an animal when the animal is threshing, and the various limudim that we derive from the hekesh between the lav, between the positive commandment that the worker is allowed to eat and the negative commandment not allowing for someone to muzzle the animal while they're working. This is going to be Daf Yud Ches, and Chevra, let's go here inside, beginning with the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Ha'omer lachaveri. A person tells his fellow, we're saying this way, Shimon is telling Reuven, Heilach Isser Zeh, Shimon is the buyer. Shimon is giving Reuven an Isser, a coin, and for that he's buying Be'esrim Te'enim for 20 figs, and he's telling him, Sha'avoid li, I will be the one selecting it. Okay? In other words, the buyer is going to be the one picking it off the tree by himself. Why is this important? This will make it clear, based on the Gemara that we learned, that this law, that only when there is tseiruf does mekach establish the kaviyus, is not only Rabbi Yehuda. It can even be according to Rav Meir, because this is the first case of the Mishnah. Now, what's very important isn't only that the buyer told the seller that I will select it, and therefore meaning he's going to pick it. That's one part of it. That will make this Mishnah not needing to follow only Rabbi Yehuda. Everyone subscribes to the need of tseiruf, again, from mekach to establish a kaviyus. There's another detail. Since when the money was exchanged, it was not clear which figs will be the figs that belongs to the buyer. So when does the sale actually go into effect? When he takes it off the tree. That's very important. Because if the sale would have been chal, would have gone into effect when the figs are still connected to the tree, then the whole din that mekach establishes a kvius will be irrelevant. Because mekach will never establish a kvius by a product that's still mechuber lakarka. Now, says the Mishnah, okay, so first of all, the buyer is picking it. Boirer v'oichel. Boirer v'oichel means that he's allowed to select only one fig at a time and eat it achilas aray. That's what the Mishnah is saying. And again, this isn't only according to Rabbi Yehuda, but based on what we learned in last year, even let Rabbi Meir. Similarly, figs are easy because every fig is separated from the other. So if you pick one fig at a time, there is no combining, there is no gathering. Therefore, there's no, the mekach won't do anything. Similarly, if the buyer is telling the seller, I'm giving you Isser, and I'm buying a cluster of grapes. And what's important here is that while the money was exchanged, it's not clear which cluster of grape or grapes. I will choose later. This is Negeya because then the sale is not in effect yet. We don't know what cluster of grapes. When will the sale be chal? When the buyer chooses by picking it. So when he picks it, it's already disconnected. Here also, even though there's a bona fide mekach on a dover that's already harvested, based on the rule of tseiruf, that if it's not combined, mekach will not establish a kvius, migarger v'oichel. The buyer will be allowed not to pick a cluster at a time, to pick one grape at a time. In other words, if he takes the cluster off the vine, well, on every cluster there's more than 2 grapes. That's a bona fide mekach. He cannot even snack. But if he's going to take 1 grape at a time, so they were never at one time 2 grapes in his hand, then he can eat it even without separating any tithings. And again, by default, I know people already asked a few times, what's the definition of achilas aray? I don't know if it's that much about how much you eat, because a person can snack the whole day and end up eating a lot of food. It's still snacking. It's that he's eating it one at a time. There's no, like when you eat a meal, I think you put on the plate, you put your steak and you put your potatoes, you have food on your plate. Like you're not eating it all in your mouth at the same time, but it's gathered. When you're taking one and you're eating, then you're taking one and you're eating, that is for sure in the category of snacking. You're snacking. Now comes a bigger chiddush. Biggest chiddush is a pomegranate. You see, figs, each fig is separated from the other. Grapes, every grape is separated, but they're connected by the cluster. So the Mishnah is saying, we don't view them. It's a grape at a time. What happens if the person is buying berimoin? The buyer is buying a pomegranate, again, that I will choose, which means that when he gives him the money, the sale did not go into effect. We don't even know which pomegranate. If the buyer, instead of taking the pomegranate off the tree, will crack it open and take a seed at a time, we also say, there was no tzeduf. On the other hand, what is the Mishnah saying? That if he picks a pomegranate, we don't look at a pomegranate the way we look at a fig. Fig is 1 unit. Pomegranate is 613 seeds. That's what Chazal say, whether it's literal or not. So in order for you to have this non-combining by the pomegranate, it has to be that you're only taking 1 seed at a time. And here again, you won't have to tithe if you only want to snack, which is what you're doing when you're eating 1 little seed at a time. Final, biggest chiddush, ba'avatiach, if the buyer is buying, let's go, avatiach means a watermelon, sha'avarli. Now, let me ask you a question. How do you can argue, okay, 1 watermelon at a time. We don't say that. Why? I think because it's so big, you can't say it's 1 unit, just like by a cluster of grapes. You don't say it's 1. I know by grapes it's different because every cluster has many grapes. What will be considered a unit of the watermelon? So there are 2 versions in text in the Mishnah. What's written over here is soifes v'oichel. Soifes v'oichel says that Asherilio, that he slices off a small little piece and he can eat. I don't know how you define that. In other words, instead of him taking the watermelon out of the ground, he slices off a small piece. That's called snacking. That's also called, there's no combination. How little, I don't know. But others have a different version because it's difficult to explain that. What do you mean you're cutting off a slice? How do you define that? So they say not soifes, but koifef. You know what koifef means? You can bend down and eat it. I know it doesn't sound that this is proper etiquette. That means that if you're going to bite out of the watermelon straight from the ground, only then do we say there's no tzeduf. A biteful. The moment you take it out, we say already that's called tzeduf, by the watermelon. What we don't say is you can take 1 watermelon at a time. You can't say that, but it's too big. It's a big thing. It's a proper sale. Okay, atkan. Avol, in contrast, if the buyer tells the seller, not I'm giving you an isser for the 20 figs that I will pick, which also implies that I will choose, which means that when the money was given, we didn't know what is being sold yet. We knew 20 figs, but we didn't know which ones. So the sale cannot go into effect. But if, when he gives them the money, they already defined which figs, the buyer tells the seller, be'esrim te'enim elu, with these 20 figs, or b'shnei eshkoilos elu, with these 2 clusters, or b'shnei demoinim elu, b'shnei avatichem elu. So you would think, not only 1 cluster, 2 clusters. You would say, vadai, there's tzeduf, right? That's a mekach. We don't say that. Over here, the buyer can take them 2 at a time. Or the seller can take 2 and give it to the buyer, Rabbi Yehuda. And you will still be allowed to snack from it. You will still be allowed. Why? Mekach. There was a sale. There was two. There was a combining. Because since the money was given, and when the money was given, it was already clear which watermelons, which clusters, etc., are going to be sold. For this, we view the sale to already have gone into effect while it's still connected to the ground. So we don't say that the buyer bought fruit. The buyer bought the land. He bought not futures. He bought the current part of the land, the watermelon part. Amazing. Okay. He bought a portion of the orchard. He bought a portion of the land. That's the way we view it. And now, new topic, even though there's going to be an overlap. I'll just speak it out again to show you the overlap. The new topic is sale, which is affecting a kvius, doesn't only have to be when one gives money for the item that he or she is buying. That's one way to affect a sale. Another way to affect a sale would be by giving you a service. So, by the way, it was not uncommon. We see in the times of Chazal that people would work for food. That is what they got paid. So if I have no right to your food, what's giving me the right is me working for you. When I take that food, Aviv, we view that food as it being purchased by me in exchange of my labor. Mekach. Mekach affects kvios. Now again, if I take one at a time, so we're not erasing everything we learned until now. If I only take one at a time, even let up Meir, there's no combining. Okay, snack. But if I take two at a time, then there's seiruf. All right? Then I'm not allowed to snack. Even though I didn't give you money, I gave you my work. But there's a caveat. And as this will be developed, I know this sugya is not related at all to Maasros, but it will be related here. That when I work for you, depending what type of work I'm doing, this is key. We're gonna develop this today and more tomorrow. When I'm working, not in a cheese factory, if milk doesn't come from the ground, even though it's gedule, me gedule karka, in other areas of halacha, we do consider this gedule karka, but not for this. For this, gedule karka means if I am working for items that grow from the ground, literally, and my job is not to weed a field, just as an example. When I'm weeding a field, what's my job? Not to harvest the product, to remove the weeds. So I'm not working with detached produce. But if my job is to work prior post, but there's going to be items that are detached that I'm working with, even though my job was to begin earlier. When the items are detached, prior to them being packaged, there's a window. The Torah says that the worker has the right to eat from it while he or she is working. They're not allowed to take it home. Oh, they're not allowed to say, you know what? If I would have been snacking, I would have eaten, let's say, a cluster of grapes. You know what? I'm not going to eat it now. I'll take it home for supper. You're not allowed to do that. But while you're working, you are allowed to eat. That produce that God gave the worker is not called a sale. So the produce taking it, even if he takes two at a time or more, there is no rule, he can't even snack. He could snack. There is no sale here. God gave it to him. So far, so good. So far, so good. Now the question is, what happens if a worker, let's say from his ignorance, he doesn't know that God gave it to him? The worker tells the employer, I'm working for you, and as a bonus, whatever, however he worded it. And my condition is that I should be allowed to eat while I'm working. So from the worker's perspective, he's getting that because of his labor. So will we classify that as a sale, or do we classify that as a biblical right, and therefore it's not a sale? What will be amazing is that the Mara Fulda and the Rashi Rilyo, they argue in the Pshat and the Mishnah from one extreme to the other. We're going to learn this continuously like the Mara Fulda, which is that we don't consider it a sale. We do not consider it a sale. Just want to throw out there that if you look on the Rashi Rilyo in the Mishnah and today in the Amud Beis and the Gemara, he learns the opposite, but we don't have enough time to go through this whole sugya in two completely opposite directions. So let's read it inside. If a person hires a worker, It sounds like we're going into Bava Metzia, right? Liksois b'te'enim, and the job of the worker is either liksois b'te'enim means to spread figs out to dry, or Iran literally liksois te'enim means that's really part of the process. Is that after these figs are detached, they have stems. Liksois means to cut. So if you want to dry it out, you don't want to dry it out with the stem. So his job was to cut off the stems. Whichever one it means, one thing is clear. He's working with something that grew from the ground, but he's working with it when it's already detached, which is exactly where God gives the worker the right to eat it. Okay? Now, so he really had the right. Nevertheless, Amaloi, the worker, told the employer prior to working, when he's making his contract, you know what? I agree to the work, to the job, on the condition that I may eat from the figs. So do we view these figs as an exchange for his labor, thus mekach, thus koiveya, or no? It's a biblical right that he has. So the way the Marafulda learns that even though the worker made that stipulation, he is allowed to eat achilas arai, because we don't view it as a sale. His stipulation did not accord him with any new privilege. Verstehst? Okay. And again, amazing how the Rash Arilio, second to last line in the right column, learns mamish the opposite. That it is considered a sale, and the only way he gets to eat without tithing it is only by taking one at a time. Because of the rule that even when there's a mekach, when you take one at a time, even Rav Meir, that's a whole different way of learning the Mishnah over here. But the pshat, the way we're going to learn the Marafulda, look at the Marafulda, 12 lines from the top. We don't say it's a sale. Why? Because since Torah told him you can eat, and he would have had that right even if he would not have made that stipulation. So his stipulation is not really according him with any new privilege. It's not adding anything. Therefore, it's not a sale. Now, let's go into another case. What happens if the worker is telling his employer or potential employer when they're negotiating al menasha oichal ani ubeni, on the condition that I and my son can eat. Now, guys, obviously we're speaking about a case where his son is not employed. So minatoida, the son is not entitled. So he said, me and my son. And the employer agreed. So you know what we say? He can eat and be exempt. Because again, even though he made a stipulation, it didn't add anything. He would have had that right anyway. But the son cannot eat without tithing, not even casual. Why? Because that's called a sale. Son got it because the father paid with labor. Oi, or even more, this guy says, I'm giving up my right. This guy knew that God gave him the right. He told his employer, listen, you're not going to lose anything. I just want to say one thing. I won't eat. I'll refrain from eating. But I want for my son to be allowed to eat. God never gave that right. If the employer agreed, this is also now viewed as a sale. Because the son, bottom line is, only has the right to eat because of his stipulation. His stipulation isn't connected to his labor. So we view the figs as an exchange for labor, which is thus a sale.
Wait, the son cannot exchange his place with the dad? The dad won't eat, the son can.
Doesn't work that way, exactly. In other words, it's not pshat kevan that God is saying that I have the right to eat while I'm working, and now it's mine, and now that it's mine, I can give it to my son by telling the owner, you're not losing, I'm not eating. My son eats less than me. It doesn't work that way. It's not mine. While I'm working, God gives me the right to eat. All right. So even though he linked them together, he still can eat and he'll be exempt. He can eat not if he gave up that right. We're talking about in the first case. Or in the second case, that his son, and in the first case, but the son will be chayev because the son's right only comes from the father's stipulation. So that's viewed as a mecca. Gewalt.
Does it matter if the son eats one at a time? Or is that completely
very good,
not
I'm
part
happy
of
you're
this
saying
conversation?
Very good. In other words, the son's eating is called a sale. And now, based on everything we learned, even though it's a sale, Vlad, very good. If the son will eat one at a time, there's no combination. Let's go nach with the Gemara yesterday. Even Rabbi Meir, Vadai, Rabbi Yehuda will say the son also is allowed to eat. You're right, Vlad. The son can eat. But that's because you know already the details of Mekach. The question here is it Bechlala Mekach? Okay. Almanas, another case, another variation of this. Almanas, oichel b'shas haktzira ula achar haktziyah. The Torah's gifted, the Torah's given right, the biblical right for the worker to eat is only while he's working. But this guy stipulated, I want to have the right to eat while I'm doing this ktsiyah. Let's go while I'm spreading out the figs. And I also want to have the right after the figs are dried, after I did my work. Okay? After I'm working, after I finished working. We don't combine it all together. We keep consistent. B'shas haktziyah oichel upater. Even though that was part of his stipulation didn't give him that, he would have had it anyways. So the one when he's eating, while he's working, let's go, Vlad, he can take two at a time and be allowed to snack. After the ktsiyah, that's called a sale. Now that there's a sale, if he wants to snack, he has to know the dinam of Mekach. And you're right. And if he would take one at a time, he would still be exempt because he only took one at a time. Because that which he's going to be eating after he finishes working, that's not a biblical right that he has. Bottom line, whatever is being eaten, not because of God's gift or because God's sanction, that is called a sale and chayiv prior to snacking, or you find this heter of not doing a tziruf.
Sorry. Quick question. I'm trying to understand the distinction between he's in the process of working, he's in the process of laying out the figs, so that's still process. But once he laid them out, then it's no longer the process?
No longer the process. In other words, Vlad, we're not talking about, even if a person is getting paid by the hour, which is not the case here, he's getting paid to do a job. So when he finished doing the job, you end it.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Now, another detail in this din. We're getting off on this whole topic. That hoya oisa bilevasim. Levasim is an inferior type of fig. It's called levasim. B'noi sheva is a superior type of fig. Now, guys, if I'm working for you, even if you have two orchards, one of levasim, one of b'noi sheva, while I'm working with one, I can only eat from that one, even though I'm going to be working later with the other. Mishnah says that while the worker is, let's say, is laying out to dry the levasim figs, and that's not only because he's going from inferior to superior. Even if he's working with b'noi sheva, and the same balabas also has levasim, he may not eat while he's working with the b'noi sheva figs from the levasim. That he can't do. You know what he could do? If I am working for you, my friend, and you have two orchards, one of levasim, one of b'noi sheva. Now the Torah says that I can eat while I'm working. I can't take it home. I have the right to tell myself, listen, I know my capacity to snack. The most I'm going to eat will be 10 figs, and I'll be stuffed. I have the right to tell myself, I'm not going to snack, not even one fig when I'm doing the levasim, for me to have more room for the b'noi sheva that I can do. As long as I eat the b'noi sheva while I'm working with b'noi sheva, that avol moineyahu es atzmo, a worker is allowed to restrain himself when he's working with the inferior figs, and eat it then. That's not a problem.
Rabbi, wait, I'm sorry. If he's restraining himself, his quality of work will drop.
I disagree with you.
He's thinking the whole time he's hungry. If a person is
restraining himself from, I would even say when a person is snacking, they're becoming a glutton, and they're filling themselves with sugar, and they're becoming emotionally unbalanced. I think that ruins the work. I don't know if a person restraining oneself becomes wounded. I think we become much greater men when there's the right amount of restraint, particularly when a person restrains himself from snacking. I think you become a greater you.
Yeah, good one.
Okay.
Okay, and Ito is making another point. Ito is saying, and even if he becomes a little bit weakened, we don't view it that way. We don't view it that way. Remember, we had the soul sugi. If I rented your donkey, and even if your donkey that day was having a bad day, so instead of taking 1 day to get there, it took 2 days to get there. I cannot have a complaint on the owner. This time is money is not so pashut in halach. As long as the work is being done. Good point, Ito. You're right.
The same concept. I restrain myself, but not completely. Let's say I have 1 from Levasim, and then I move on and have 9 from B'nai Sheva. Does that still apply the same way?
Sure. No, the point, one thing, you can only eat whatever you're eating from while you're working with it. That's the rule. When you're not working with it, you can't eat anymore. You can't take the food from the shul home. When you're sitting by the kiddush, es gesundheit, eat, don't eat. Person can say, well, since I had the right to eat it, so it's mine, therefore, I'm going to go take it. No. Okay, now, a final sale, which is not money, called a barter. Same idea. A barter is a sale. So, if a person barters figs with his friend, right? Either both parties are receiving figs as they are to eat, or both parties, after they receive their figs, will still process it further to dry them out. That's called liksois, zel liksois v'zel liksois. Or one will eat it, one is going to still take another step of its processing, which is drying it out. So in all cases, according to the Tanna Kama, chayav, meaning none of the recipients will be allowed to snack from it. Again, Vlad said good, unless they take one at a time. But let's leave that out. Why? That's called a sale. Sale is a sale. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. And Rabbi Yehuda says that when is a sale? When does Mekach establish tithing? This is the machlokes we had in the previous Mishnah by Truma. Only when the product is a product shenigmer malachtai, which is what the Rambam says. The Rambam says the shisha devarim are kiveya maisres la'achar shenigmer malachton. If I am getting my figs, I'm paying you money, I'm paying you my figs, doesn't matter. Barter is a sale. But if my intention, me the buyer, is after I get the figs, is still to let them out to dry, that means that I am defining these figs to be figs, shaloi nigmar malachton. Produce, shaloi nigmar malachton, according to the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, won't be included in the rule that mekach is koiveya. Mekach will not be koiveya. So even though there is a barter sale, and even though the buyer is taking 10 figs at a time, not 2, 10, 100, he can snack from it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that hamachliv loicher, the buyer that's buying it to eat it, which means that the figs that he's getting through the barter is nigmar malachton. Barter is a sale. Taka chayev means he's obligated to tie them, or he's not allowed to snack from them. But the one who's getting it for liksois will be pater, because like we said, Rabbi Yehuda holds like the Chachamim by Truma, that if mekach or barter or anything, if halachic mekach happens when the item is not yet nigmar malachton, mekach does not trigger, does not affect a kivius. Beautiful. That is the explicit machlokes we have in the Mishnah. Again, correlating to the machlokes we had in Halacha Gimel between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, the same topic regarding Truma. Atkan the Mishnah. Daf Yud Chesam with Beis. I know it took a long time to learn the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to go a lot quicker. So first of all, the first case of the Mishnah was just going to the din of Tzeiruf, that as long as we didn't specify what figs are being bought, even though the buyer gave the money to the seller, sale didn't go into effect because we don't even know which figs are being sold, which is a problem, which means that when does the sale go into effect? When he picks them. Well, when a item that's detached falls into the rule that mekach is koiveya. Eloma, there has to be tzeiruf. So the Mishnah says if he picks one at a time, grapes, one grape at a time, one seed of the pomegranate at a time, or one little slice of watermelon, which is difficult to understand how to qualify that. This is the Mishnah. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that even when it comes to the grapes in the cluster, even though megaran achas v'achas v'hoylech v'oichel, even if you're going to end up eating the ganze cluster, what do you mean you're taking one at a time? Come on, you ate the whole cluster. You know, figs are, at least they're detached. Everyone is individualized. Cluster is one cluster. and there are many grapes on the cluster, and this guy ended up eating the whole cluster. It doesn't matter. He didn't take more than one at a time. And indeed, Amalei Rab Chia Bar Voya, you should know something. Not only are you right in theory, Rabbeinu HaKadosh Taka did that. It means that when he wanted to snack, and he bought someone else's item as a snack, he once took one grape at a time, and he ate the whole cluster. Well, there's a joke. There used to be these orange orchards that were right next to the Ben Gurion airport. I think it was from Kfar Chabad. So Jiggins says, the great comedian, the clean, Jewish, intelligent comedian, how we should need more of them. He says that he landed in Eretz Yisrael, and he goes down, he was pashut hungry, and there was an orchard, the orange, so he gets out of the car and he eats an orange. Makes a brach, eats an orange. So a guy shouts out, Loi Sigzoil. So he says, Gebakuk, a country that not only when you want to eat something, you have it available, while you're eating, you have a Dvar Torah also, together with that. Okay. So here we go. But Rabbi bought it. Now, here we go. Avatiach shesafas boy afilu kol shuhu. Now, there are so many different ways of learning this. We don't have time. One way is that we're moving away now from the laws of Maisris, and we're going into a whole new halacha, which is, if I give you money to buy figs, the Mishnah says is that they didn't specify which ones. So then there is an option for the buyer after the money was given. He gets to pick which one. That's what he thought, I'll pick. Is there a time where he no longer can retract, where the seller tells him, you already picked this one. You already picked it. This is very important. Like in a supermarket. I didn't give money. That's different. I didn't give money yet, but I put items in my cart. Let's say I gave the money to the cash register, but I told him, you know what? I don't like the way this looks. Can you make that exchange? So what we're learning right now is that if the buyer did not do anything to the item, he can exchange it. He can say, I want something else. But the moment he did something, now how do you define something? What I'm saying now, l'choira, is dependent on the time and place. I think here in America, people are a lot more picky. I think any little thing is already, you scratched it, right? What's called, you broke it, you own it, or something like that. Here we're saying, like a chiddush, that if you cut a little slice out of the watermelon, now you cannot retract. I thought to myself, pshita, it must mean that it wasn't such a pshita. Whatever this little amount, you might have thought that's the way that Asher earlier was learning it befedish. Look inside. I just want to read it inside because others learn it so different. The second line from the top in the right column. Shesafas boy, shechatach boy, va'afilu kol shehu. Even if you took a little sliver out of the watermelon, now kanoi v'shuv eino yachol haniach zev v'libron acher. The chiddush is you can't. I would even say by a watermelon, there's an additional chiddush that we all know that we have a lot of watermelon here by the end of fasting. How do you know if the watermelon is good? Maybe you would think by a watermelon that the buyer does have the right just to see. And maybe if he sees it's not a good watermelon, he should have the right. Maybe that's why. But nevertheless, you can't do that. Once you opened it up, it's yours. You own it. But Rabbi Yoina wanted to know, what about in a rimoin? And you know what? He doesn't have an answer. That means that he has a side to say, a pomegranate is not a watermelon is one. There's one meat. A pomegranate has sections.
This is off the tree already?
This assumes they are off the tree or on the tree. Makes no difference for this. In other words, I'm buying from you a pomegranate. Rabbi Yoina is saying maybe, this is a whole different than a kinyanim, that maybe by pomegranates also, you can't tell how the seeds are, how juicy it is, how not juicy it is, if it's sweet, if it's tart. So the guy, maybe even if the guy picks out one seed, maybe he still has the right to tell the seller, I don't want this one. Because one seed of a pomegranate didn't open up the pomegranate the way watermelon does.
But Rabbi, you're cutting it open and nobody else will buy it.
Not the ripening, take it off the tree.
Okay, so let me go. You took it off the tree.
Took it off.
Okay.
So that means you did something to it.
No, the cell, it's already off the tree.
Oh, the seller already took it off.
Let's go with that. Yeah, I'm saying this not with certainty, but I under the Gemara, according to the Rashidel, is just speaking about Hilchas Kinyanim. When I bought one and I get to pick which one, there has to be a point where I cannot. So it's a chiddush. By the watermelon, he can. By the rimoin, maybe you can take one out.
But if you open it up, the price will drop for that one, and nobody will possibly
that's why
buy it.
I think, Kevan, that nowadays, since the price will drop, I don't think there would be such a right. I just threw that out there. I think that it wasn't that way. It wasn't that way in the times of Chazal. There was a lot more liberty. Things were not perfect.
Baby used to sell used to cut for you a piece, and after he cut for you a piece, to show the opportunity, then he had to buy it. But he
Well, I'm saying like it was like the culture in Yerushalmi way back when, not when he's a young man, Shleima, but not yesterday, is that when you agree to buy a watermelon, the store owner needed to cut out a little piece, but if it looked acceptable, good, then you're chayiv to buy it, which also meant that if it was taka not good, then it was an agreement, a non-verbal agreement, then the buyer can say, I want another one. You see? Okay. Weiter. So this goes where the worker is making a stipulation. That was not necessary. That's the whole point. So the Gemara says, Lamali almanas, afilu shloi almanas. Like, why does he have to make a stipulation? He's allowed to eat it without it. So that answers the Gemara. That's the whole point. The way the Marafulda learns. Amar Rab Oven b'shem Rab Shammai, again Rab Shammai spelled with two yuds. Lochein hi tzricha. That's the whole point. He has the right. This worker, let's say, is an Am Haaretz. He made a stipulation. From the worker's perspective, he's only getting to eat, let's say, the figs when he's drying them because of his stipulation, because of his work. So there would be a havamina to think that now it will be classified as a mekach. That's the chiddush, that afilu amalei almenas doesn't change the fact that since his stipulation didn't grant him a right, he had that right anyways, therefore it's not viewed as a mekach. Now we're going to go into a Bavli Bava Metzia, not Bavli, but in Bavli Bava Metzia, Daf Tzadek Aleph on the basis where we have this whole sugi. Tanon Taminon, we learned in the Mishnah Bava Metzia, what type of work do you have to do? Now, Aviv, I want to say one thing that we already said in the words of introduction. We have a few minutes that the Gemara as a given is comparing the din that we have in Devarim Chav Gimel, which is both in Parshas Kiseitze, but one is earlier. That a worker, the Torah gives two psukim, kisavai bekerem reyecha, that you can eat. To another negative commandment, loisachsam shar b'dishay, don't muzzle the ox when the ox is threshing. Now listen to this. What type of work does the work have to do? Does it have to be similar to the ox or not similar to the ox? What would that mean as an example? What happens if the work that the worker is doing is minimum? He's only working with his hands, but not with his feet. The Gemara will give an example. This is a Mishnah. He's only working with his feet, but not with his hands. He's only working with his shoulders, but not with his feet, nor with his hands. Maybe that's too little of a work for him to have the right to nash on that produce during that window. Says the Mishnah still, Hareze Yoichal, he's still allowed to eat. 1 second, we'll see there's a Machlekes Tanoim. This is a Mishnah. Now on that, the Tanachen, we also learned in a Braisa. The Braisa always elaborates more than a Mishnah. So the Braisa is telling you the same din, but the Braisa is giving you examples. What would be a worker that's only hired to work with his hands? That's a worker that was hired to be oiged to bundle stalks of grain. That's it. He's working with his hands. Ben Aglev with his feet. He's gathering heavier items by using his feet, by only using his feet. What would be a worker that's only hired to work with the shoulders? Afilu al ksefoi. So the Baraisa gives an example, betoyin, that the worker, the employer is trying to load up his trucks, in those days his donkeys. So you need to have someone, you have a couple of people, there's a whole production line. And Reuven puts it on the shoulders of Shimon, and Shimon's job is to lift up his shoulder and to throw it on the back of the donkey. Just as an example, he's not using his hand, he's not using his feet. Bottom line is that even though they are only working with one body part, they are included in this mitzvah in the Torah. However, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says, "At sheyaseh biyadav uberaglav ubegufay." Work is with your hands and your feet and your body. Why? Because we compare this to the din of leisachsam shor b'dishay. And my friends, when an ox works, how is he working? He's working with the ganze body, the hands of the oxes, the four legs. You understand? He's threshing. Kedayish. That ma dayish u'eisa b'yad raglav gufay. Af kol davar only if shu'eisa b'yad raglav gufay. That's called work. That's a good beruchnius. What's work? What does God want from us? Some people work with their hands. Some people work with their legs. Some people work with their shoulders. Says Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, work, avoida is biyodoy uberaglav ubegufay. Giving tzedakah b'mamoin ubeguf ubenefesh. Give it all. Now, another din we learn from Daesh. Let's see how far we can get. Since we are comparing this din of the worker being allowed to eat, like the ox not being allowed to be muzzled, Daesh, ma Daesh miyuchad, threshing is something that's done only betolish. So when does Hashem give this worker that right? Only when he's working with something that's detached. As an example, what does that exclude? Yotza hamenakesh b'shuma b'betzalim, if the job is only to weed a garlic or onion field. Now, what happens if he ends up taking out an onion? That was not his job. So the onion, the fruit is attached. He cannot eat from attached fruit. Another exclusion, v'hamisamech, not simcha with a sin, but with a samach, bigafanim. His job is to prop up the vines on the reeds. It should not be ragliois. Remember those expressions, right, Kevin? We went over here to your vineyard. That was his job, to put it on the trellis. So everything is attached. Or if his job is only to hold under the olive trees, but not to take off olives, the worker has no such right. I want to chapwa. You have another half a minute. A few tests, just one more. We have a lot more tomorrow. Daesh, another thing, another limud that we learned from this hekish, that ma daesh miyuchad shigedulav min haaretz, just like threshing is something that grows from the ground. The worker has the right, af kol davar, only if shigedulav min haaretz. What are we excluding? What happens if someone is working in a cheese factory? Yotza hachoylev v'hamegabein v'hamachabetz. If a person is milking cows, pressing cheese, producing milk solids, even though the cow lives off the ground. Gedulai, gedulin. We don't say that. He has no such right. The Torah says he can eat it. I'm working in a candy factory. I should be allowed to eat it. No, you cannot. And there's a lot more limudim that we're going to go into tomorrow regarding this comparison.
Rabbi, it's not because he's hungry or because he sees the food that he can eat.
It cannot be only because of that. Because if that would be the case, then a person who works in